Well, as we were talking in the last segment about brick and mortar and online sales and the $1 billion of sales on Thanksgiving on people's cell phones, that number is just crazy. But it almost makes it sound like you're saying that brick and mortar is going away. Everybody's going to buy everything online at some point in the future.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that brick and mortar will cease to exist in 20 years. I just think there's so many headwinds in relation to brick and mortar. And look, Rev, I'm a hedge your bet kind of guy. I mean, in my business life, I always look at headwinds and tailwinds, macros. You know, obviously, if you get in, I mean, Steve Jobs got filthy rich or his estate now, creating something that people didn't even know they wanted. But there's some things that are fairly clear and obvious to me. And I'm a partner in a couple of businesses that own a lot of brick and mortar. That worries me. So I diversified and became a business person. I'm the sole owner in a business that is very dependent on growth in e-commerce. Without being too detailed and specific and calling names of businesses, I looked down the road and I said, man, in 20 years, you know, a lot of my passive income or retirement income, I hope, comes from some brick and mortar endeavors I've made, but I'm not as optimistic about that. So I started looking for other opportunities, and I got in the logistics business. And the reason I got in the logistics business is why? E-commerce. I mean, it was all about e-commerce. It wasn't about growth in manufacturing or growth in, you know, hospitality, but it's all about e-commerce. I looked at some numbers, and I said, I need to hedge my bet. I mean, if I've made a big bet on brick and mortar, and I believe sincerely there are a lot of tail or headwinds in relation to that, I better look around and find for a way to diversify. And I found a logistics business that I have a hand in running and owning, and well, I own all of it. I have a little bit of a hand in running it, and it's been, I think, in the long run, a fairly lucrative opportunity because it's growing leaps and bounds year to year. Here's the problem with growing in business. You know this. Growing and being profitable are two different things. For a long time, Amazon didn't make any money. I mean, they were selling the crazy out of stuff, but they weren't making a profit. Bezos was, you know, a hot shot on Wall Street, but he never made any money. Well, now they figured out logistically and the positioning of assets and kind of the streamlining of processes, how to be profitable. But I just believe that the reason you had to be bullish about Bezos was he was on to something. And Jeff Bezos is not anything more than a personal concierge. He gets you what you want on your front porch quicker than anybody else in the world. And he's got all these third-party contracts. I mean, Bezos doesn't make anything. Amazon doesn't make anything. They're in the logistics business, by and large. But do I believe there will be a world one day with no brick and mortar? No, I don't. I absolutely don't. There's still restaurants in our town without a drive-through that do fairly well. So no, I believe if you do a good job and provide quality service, there'll always be a place. I'm just talking about the macros. I'm talking about what I still refer to as the headwinds and tailwinds. Here's an interesting statistic, and here's what I think would be very troubling to me as someone who owns some brick and mortar. 10% of all sales, retail sales, are done via e-commerce. So 90% are still done in the traditional fashion. But the 10% number's growing by somewhere between 15 and 20% a year. That's mind-boggling. Anybody that knows business knows how difficult it is to manage growth that is 20% a year. And that's about what's happening. So think of this, Reb. Let's say you got to, I mean, I think you'll agree with this. If e-commerce is doing 10% of all retail business today, that means 10% less transacted in the stores. I mean, that's simple math, right? Okay, if e-commerce is growing 20% a year, then you got to believe there will be a day fairly quickly. By the year 2021, they're predicting the number will be 25%. So that's only 3 years from now. So how do you not believe there's going to be some serious struggles and some issues with brick and mortar if now it's 10%? Just 10 years ago, it was less than 1%. Now it's 10%. And it's projected in the next 3 to 5 years to be 25% of all retail sales. How do you not believe that that's going to be incredibly disruptive to brick and mortar? I mean, we're not creating that many new consumers. The economy's not growing 25%. GDP's not growing consumer price index, all these variables and all these measurements that we use to measure growth in the economy. So what we're doing, we're not finding new retail business. We're just taking the retail experience that was walking in the door of a brick and mortar, and we're changing it. And to your point, we're taking the smartphone, we're taking the home computer, and I just got to believe these people are going to get better and better and better and better at it. We as consumers have a desire for instant access. Guess when I can shop on my computer?
Anytime you
when
want
I want to. Anytime I want to. Round the clock accessibility, kind of what we were talking about there.
You don't even have to get dressed.
You don't have to get dressed. You can spend $1,000 in your drawers. And I just believe that you're fooling yourself if you don't believe that there's some serious issues. And I think it's a little bit like, and I said this earlier, I think it's a little bit like the invention of the airplane, the automobile, and the train simultaneously. I think it's going to have a staggering effect on how we shop and how we buy things. I was looking through some numbers here of last year, Christmas shopping. 74% of online shoppers rate product selection as important during the online search process. 72% of purchasers return 10% or less of the purchases. That's why I was a little bit bearish to begin with. I said, well, if you order like Alex said, I want to put that shoe on. I want to see how it fits and feels and, looks on me. Well, no big deal now. We'll send it to you. If you don't like it, guess what? We'll put a bag. We'll include a package in this package that you can ship it right back at no cost. And I think just the efficiencies of, and I do believe, Rev, in 20 years from now, half the Walmarts and half the shopping centers will be something else. I don't know what they'll be, but they'll be something else. And now this kind of feeds into my contrarian nature. It's easy to convince me that we're in the middle of this phenomenon that nobody completely and totally understands. And I certainly don't completely nor totally understand it, but I just know that.
That's a pretty big prediction. Half the Walmarts and half the shopping centers?
In 25 years? Yeah, I think so. I think there'll be something else. There's always creativity and innovation in a free market.
The next big thing.
Well, so somebody will come up with the next big thing.
Opportunity.
It may be, I don't know what you do with all these big buildings. I don't. There's some cities, I'll give an interesting example. I think there's some cities that are cutting edge. There's some cities today that are buying at a very discounted, using taxpayer dollars to buy the closed down buildings and create green space. I think they see the writing on the wall. Now, I'm not saying that's a good expenditure of public funds. I'd probably be opposed to that. But I understand why they believe that. There's some suburbs of Seattle. Seattle's kind of a cutting edge, tech kind of city. A lot of educated people live there, high per capita income. They are very innovative and creative in saying, hey, we don't want all these closed down buildings in our town. And we don't believe the businesses are coming back. So they're cutting a deal with the business owner, the person who owns the property, normally not the person operating the business. There's normally a lease arrangement in that somewhere. But let me ask you a question. Would you buy stock? Would you pay 50 cents for $1 worth of stock in shopping centers?
50 cents?
Would you? If somebody offered you a share of a shopping center in one of the most exclusive markets in the world, would you pay 50 cents on the dollar? I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And I think here's what I believe. You and I are Atlanta Braves fans. You're a bigger Braves fan than I. They moved to Buckhead. That's kind of a ritzy part of Atlanta. And the reason they moved there is the majority of their fans were from that part of the city, that side of town. And when I go to Buckhead on rare occasions and stay somewhere there's a JW Marriott that's above my pay grade. But if I want to splurge, my wife and I, when the kids were little, we'd stay there and ride on MARTA, go to the old Turner Field because it was just fun.
Yep.
I don't live like that much, but every now and then I'll live stupid, and spend all my money and regret it when I get back home. But
and it's attached to Lenox Mall.
Lenox Mall, which is one of the most exclusive malls in the Southeast. Neiman Marcus and Nordstrom's and all these high-end stores. I think there will always be a place in some of these ritzy, upscale, affluent sort of neighborhoods for the communal experience. But I think when people start counting their money and they're thinking about riding from Dillon to Florence to go to a shopping center, or they can sit at home and buy whatever they need, I think they're going to make that calculus. And I think that's the masses. I think that is the overwhelming majority. But I'm not insinuating that we're going to wake up one day and there'll be no brick and mortar. to go and experience the in-store buying experience. I'm just saying there are a lot of there are a lot of tailwinds to e-commerce and headwinds associated with brick and mortar retail. If that weren't the case, let me ask you this, Reb. Why wouldn't Walmart dig in?
As in,
hey, man, this is a passing fad. We're not going to participate in this. Walmart is investing more of their money in their e-commerce division than any other part of that division. Any other part of that company. They see the writing on the wall.
They realize they have to.
They realize that same-store sales are in decline. That they're just, this store is not going to perform as well next year as it did this year unless we participate in this e-commerce. And I see now they've got these, you pull up to the driveway.
The pickup.
I'll tell you this. The company that I'm associated with is in the process of negotiating a deal with Walmart on same-day grocery delivery. In other words, during your lunch break today, you go on Walmart.com. I'm picking on them today because they made it very well known that they're a player. They're going to play in this space. And they were kind of the ones that everybody said, man, Walmart's going to get their brains beat out because Amazon, Amazon's taking all of Walmart's customers because nobody wants to go to Walmart anymore and pass the wide loads and people walking at, half a mile an hour. It's not a pleasant shopping experience as far as I'm concerned. But now what did Walmart do? They said, okay, we'll just play in that space. We got a lot of money. We got a lot of capital. We got a lot of infrastructure and understanding of retail. We'll just play in that space. And Walmart now is transitioning what I believe. Here's an interesting quote. We call Walmart the 800-pound gorilla. I've referenced them as that. Walmart's market cap is about $200 billion, $215 billion. That's a very valuable company. Wow. When you go to Walmart in the next 3 weeks and you hear the sound, doot, 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 the checkout sound, that's money going to Bentonville, Arkansas.
Sure it is.
It's an incredibly profitable.
Might as well be cha-ching.
It is.
Cha-ching.
Yeah, you're exactly right. When you hear the doot, 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 that's cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Their market cap is $215 billion. Guess what Amazon's is? $400 billion. So the market, the investment world believes that Amazon today is twice as valuable as Walmart. Twice, Reb. That's the tailwinds I'm talking about. And I think it's beyond dispute that we are in the middle of the invention of the aircraft, the train, and the automobile simultaneously. I think we're in the most disruptive age, and I think it's all about this magic that I've got in my hand called the phone. And when people sit, eat a turkey sandwich and some giblet gravy, and then lay on the couch, and instead of watching the Dallas Cowboys and the Detroit Lions, you order $300 worth of stuff that normally you would have gone on Black Friday. They've got all these days now, man. Cyber Monday and Black Friday and whatnot. It's naive to believe that every Walmart open today will be open in 25 years. And every shopping center open today will be open in 25 years. Now, I do believe this, and we can do this tomorrow. I can go into what I perceive to be the dangers of that. Because I think there's a lot of danger lurking. We're going to wake up one day, and everybody in every neighborhood will have 6 boxes on their front porch and won't be a damn business open in town. So I'm not saying all of this is good, and I'm not saying all of this will serve the communities of which it happens well. But I'm just talking about the inevitable. And I think inevitably these people who transact in e-commerce are real good at it, that they're very enticing to the consumer. And Rev, I just think we're in the middle of one of the most disruptive ages in commerce that we've ever